Hello, it's Lieutenant, 1st Minnesota Sharpshooters. Left the comfort of the barracks today. We're out in the Northland. Let's load up some of our gear, store it away in the wagon, 4 days rations, and head on out to the field. First priority when we get to the cabin is to assess the state of the cabin, look for any damage, fallen trees. Hopefully the wood stove's in operational condition. Just coming around to a clearing now, into sight of the log cabin. Initially everything looks to be in good condition. I don't see any fallen trees. At least I can see the stove pipe standing straight up. Let's head on in. Well, the inside looks to be in pretty good condition. Got a couple candles lit. The one exception to this is the stovepipe has come undone, with the other half laying on the floor. If I want any heat tonight, I'm going to have to get this hooked back up again so that I can light the wood stove. Load in the cabin, heading back to the wagon to pick up the second load. As I mentioned, it's about a half-mile trek from the main road back to the cabin. So about a 15-minute hike. Low temps for tonight are expected to be around 10 or perhaps lower. I can't get the wood stove repaired and a fire lit. I'll be using every stitch of wool I have to keep warm tonight. Well, I was able to get the stovepipe attached. I got some wood from the wood shed. Next step is just to light up some of this birch bark and get the stove started. Had very little trouble getting the stove going. As a general rule, I keep plenty of dry wood and birch bark around. There's a time to practice your fire starting skills, but after a half day's march and a trek back through the woods, this is not one of them. So let's take a look around the log cabin. Up in the loft, which is clearly the warmest place to be, and looking down over the log stove. Well, I spent a comfortable night in the cabin. The wood stove worked great. You can see I just put some wood in it. Got some smoke coming out the smokestack. And also you can see the snow melting from the roof. The roof is not insulated, and of course the stove melts the snow. Some of the landscape. A couple of inches of fresh snow. Well, we're back, day 2. Back at the cabin, trudging through the woods. A lot of good memories at this place. The building of the log cabin was done about over a 5-year period. Quite a bit of effort was spent in bringing supplies into the work site, but we sure had a great time working together and building things up. The goal was to use, first and foremost, natural materials without power tools. So a lot of hand cutting with saws, and axes, swinging axes. The property owners also were against us taking down live trees. As you can imagine, without taking down live trees, that really limited some of the building material that was available. So first choice was indeed natural materials. Next in line was, of course, recycled materials. Some of the windows were used as recycled materials. Planking for the floor was crates. There is a sawmill not too far from here, so we're able to get some of the discarded wood, the really imperfections, or the rounds as they're called, that made great building materials. And also the used market, the wood stove, that's a Craigslist purchase. So tempting to go used. And then finally, if those weren't acceptable, then purchasing. So wintertime in this area is probably one of my favorite times. You can see from all the snow, just great time to move around. Obviously this gives you a challenge too, just for simply keeping warm, at night. So but the log cabin makes that pretty easy. I love to take my wet clothes off from a hard day's march or at the target range and drive up in the rafters, which I'll show you in just a couple minutes. By the time you wake up in the morning, everything's nice and dry. Let's head back inside and we'll take a look how things are. I was away from the cabin for about 12 hours, and the wood stove, of course, is out. We'll have to get that relit. You want to bring in kind of safe potable water. That's something you haul in. As I mentioned, I was away for 12 hours. My water supply is now a block of frozen ice. I'll have to thaw this out if I hope to get a drink of clean water. As some of my pards in the Living History group know, as you build things, you kind of get to know every nook and crevice. Every board and log that was laid reminds me of friends and family working on this, or things I've done. Here's we can see some of the planks that hold up the loft in the interior. With some dry tinder and birch bark, we'll get this fire going full strength in no time, warming this place up, and allow me to do some other soldier activities, like reading or filing reports. One of my very good friends in the reenactment business add a little extra art and inscription. Reason and calm judgments are the qualities of a good leader. As far as safety was involved, we installed the wood stove. I know I wanted some fire protection. So sharing a little bit in common with Thomas Jackson, I built this stone wall behind the fireplace using field stones primarily from this local region, but also some rocks from different areas that I was fond of. For example, some of the rocks on the ridge came from Taylor's Falls area. One of the stones near our family cabin that we grew up on, and yet another one a couple miles away from historic Fort Snelling. Probably my favorite part of the log cabin is the loft area. Let's head on up there and let's take a look. Loft is accessible by a little ladder. Here's my sleeping quarters for the night. Obviously heat rises, making this clearly the warmest part in the cabin. I've got an extra blanket with me next to my gray coat, just in case I get cold. My design goal up here was to have as much window light as I could, so that it would provide a nice place for reading or filing reports. Up in the rafters, I use this area to dry my socks or other clothing at night. Small stream that runs through the property that I'd like to take you down. As you can see, got a pretty steep hill in front of us. I'm gonna have to zigzag my way around it and find a path down there. Oh, we made it to the creek. We find it still open. Obviously the flowing water keeps this from freezing. I think if we dipped our feet in there, we'd find it's pretty cold. Pards, both the fire and our fun are burning down for the weekend. Time to pack up, head to the wagon, and back to the barracks.